Hi folks, we're finished with the consumer now. It's over in the blink of an eye. We're going to pivot now to the firm, and we'll be on the firm for the remainder of the class. But let's start out with some basic production realities, and we'll dovetail that in with some costs towards the end. So let's call this Chapter 11, Part 1. And we're going to be looking at production with a specific emphasis on short-run realities and what that means for how much we can get out of a factor of production. Brass tacks, firms want to minimize cost relative to output. So they are going to go and figure out the proper queue to create. We'll deal with that in Chapter 12. But for any given queue, they want to minimize the costs that are associated with creating it. They're not particularly choosy about which production method they pick either, so long as it minimizes costs. So they may actively seek out a labor-intensive solution, or they might, stray in the direction of more machines and a capital-intensive production method. It doesn't matter as long as it's cheapest, right? But once they choose a method, they're going to run into diminishing marginal returns to a factor in the short run. And there's that phrase again, in the short run. So what is the short run? We need to establish that. Okay, so the short run is defined in economics as a time period where there's at least one factor of production that's fixed. And by fixed, I mean you can't easily change it. So a good example of this would be a factory, and the size of the factory and the machines in the factory are not easily changeable, but you could hire more labor or lay labor off relatively easy. Usually the fixed factor is capital. Doesn't have to be, but it's often the example. You can think of other scenarios though, like agriculture, where land is the thing that might not be easily changeable, but you could, easily hire more tractors or more workers. Okay. So the point of this short run is that once you've got one of those factors of production, land, labor, or capital, that are fixed, you can add more of the others, but you're going to essentially run out of the fixed factor that they need to work with. So going back to our agriculture example, if in fact you only have 10 acres of land, you can keep buying more and more tractors, but you are not going to continue to keep generating the same amount of crops per tractor that you hire. Your marginal contribution or your marginal product from the tractor is going to decline. Okay? Or in the case of our factory, you could hire more and more workers, but eventually they run out of machines and space. So you're going to get less and less out of each new worker that you hire. This is essentially a physical reality that goes all the way back into the 1800s, and that's when they realized it anyways. And this was a cornerstone for understanding how production would work. The way that they formalize that reality is with the law of diminishing returns. And the law of diminishing returns basically says that if you've got capital or some other factor that's fixed and you hire more and more labor to work, that labor is eventually going to start generating less and less output for you. So let's take a real simple example of a dog wash, right? Let's say that they've got 1,000 square feet, they've got a couple of tables, a couple of sinks, cash register, and we'll call this the pretty puppy emporium. People bring their dogs in to wash. Have you wash them. If you hire a laborer, that first laborer might be able to crank out 10 dog washes in the day. And their contribution would be 10 dog washes. When you hire the second one, they're going to be able to specialize. They're going to split their time a little bit. We're going to see that they actually were able to generate more. And that's fine in the short run. You can get 13 dog washes out of this one. But if you continue to hire people, by the time you hire the third one, you might only get an extra 10 dog washes. Now in total, you're generating 33, but by having 3 people around, the addition of that third worker brought in 10 extra washes completed. And if you keep going, you can see here that they are going to start generating less and less, to the point where if you keep hiring them, there's nothing for them to do and they start tripping all over each other. It goes negative. Okay, so you can graph these. It's real similar to total utility, right? Total product's got the same kind of basic shape. It might go increase at an increasing rate early on, but eventually it's going to start increasing at a decreasing rate and will eventually start going negative, right, if you hire too many units of labor. So that's what's going on with total product. Now on the marginal side, you're going to be able to start talking about graphing this set of numbers with the quantity of labor that you're hiring. And of course, at the beginning here, in this first region of the total product curve, we saw that the marginal contribution was rising, and then afterwards, total product kept going up, so the marginal contributions are still positive, but they are in decline until we get to this spot here, and eventually we reach 0. And if you continue to hire labor, it will actually go even lower, right? It'll go negative. They'll start getting in each other's way. This is the marginal product of labor. And marginal, as you know, just means one additional. And what we're interested in here is when we hire one additional unit of labor, how much extra product does that labor generate for us? Our product in this case is the dog washes. Okay, but this Q is the quantity of labor we're hiring, and we are measuring, say, for our third unit of labor, how many dog washes they did for us. They would have done 10. And our fourth unit would have generated 7, right? That makes sense? So you can graph both of them like this. And this is just a reality that in the short run, you're going to get less and less out of factors of production as you continue to hire them. Now, eventually, we'll talk about the long run, where I'll let you change everything. But for right now, let's just stick with the short run. The reason I'm so keen to have you stick with the short run is that the short run is going to help us understand what's happening with costs in the short run. And of course, when we are talking about production, the reality of production is going to influence what our cost structure looks like as a firm. So when the firm starts thinking about the correct Q to choose, the correct amount of output to produce, as they produce more and more output, it's going to cost them more. But what the diminishing returns in production ensures is going to happen is that as you start getting less and less out of labor, as you continue to hire them, right? You start running out of machines and land for them to work with. That labor is getting less and less product created for you per unit of labor. That means that what they're actually creating, the output over here, is going to start costing you more and more per unit to create. Because you have to keep paying the wages, right? But for every wage bill that you pay, as you expand the amount of labor, you're getting less out of your labor, which means that your output is now costing you more and more. So when MPL flips over like this, MC is going to spike. MC is just your marginal cost, and we'll revisit this in our next lecture when we start to talk about costs. Hopefully this helps you understand production. Firms want to minimize costs, right, for any given level of Q, but they're always going to run into diminishing marginal returns to a fixed factor, okay, with a fixed factor.